Berger and Jean Alesi. They have 4 podiums and 3 races between them, and victory is growing tantalizingly close. But there are other stories. David Coulthard has assumed the mantle of young charger for the Williams-Renault team, while world champion Michael Schumacher has found defending the championship tougher than winning it. Damon Hill sits atop the championship points with 2 victories, while Nigel Mansell and Mika Hakkinen struggle with the once mighty McLarens. And Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine of the Jordan team wonder where all the speed has gone. Hello again, everyone. I'm Bob Varsha. Welcome to round 4 of the Formula One World Driving Championship, the Spanish Grand Prix from Catalunya in Spain. The capital of Catalunya is Barcelona, Olympic City of 1992, and today it will host the Grand Prix of Spain. It was back in 1983 that Ferrari last won the Constructors' Championship in the hands of Patrick Tambay and René Arnoux. But there may be another title in Ferrari's future. Gerhard Berger and Jean Alesi have helped bring Ferrari back with a 3rd place in the season-opening race in Brazil, then Alesi with a 2nd in Argentina, and both men on the podium at Imola in our most recent round. The fans took to the racetrack to salute their heroes. A look at the history of this great mark since 1990 shows that after a slump from 1991 to 93, Ferrari may be on the way back, having their best year in over 5 years, since the days of Alain Prost and Nigel Mansell, in fact. With me, as always, Derek Daly. Derek, the Ferrari story, a big part of the star appeal of Formula One. But while Ferrari seems to be waxing, others appear to be waning.
Nigel Mansell is supposed to be some of that returning star appeal. Now 41 years old, and despite winning for Williams last season in Australia, he was unemployed. McLaren, having gone winless in '94, needed an established star to complement their new Mercedes star. But what has Mansell brought to the program? Team boss Ron Dennis is on record as saying he would never hire a driver he didn't understand. Yet he paid him $8 million for the '95 season. After testing, Mansell refused to drive the new McLaren because the tub was too small. McLaren then spent $500,000 to build a new monocoque, barely 3/4 of an inch wider. At Imola, Mansell was lapped. Well, having qualified 10th here, will this unlikely partnership brighten both stars? Well, this weekend has continued the struggle between Mansell and McLaren.
And Mansell's not the only one struggling. There's a look at the reigning world champion Michael Schumacher having a tough start to his 1995. This ESPN Speed World presentation is brought to you by Texaco Haviland Formula 3 Motor Oil. Add more life to your car. Take it to the star. By Firestone, America's tire since 1900. And by Tacoma, a whole new line of trucks from Toyota. It's the arrival of the fittest. Welcome back. It's a beautiful day in Barcelona, Spain. Bob Varsha and Derek Daly. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. We're ready for round 4, the Formula One World Championship. Let's take a look at the starting grid. On the pole for the 8th time in his career, Michael Schumacher of Germany in the Benetton with a lap averaging 129.5 miles an hour. Next to him, Jean Alesi of France, the Friday night provisional pole sitter for Ferrari. On row 2, Gerhard Berger of Austria. The Ferraris have been trouble-free this weekend. Next to Berger will be David Coulthard, the young Scot from Williams-Renault, coming back to the track where he made his Formula One debut. On row 3, Damon Hill, the points leader for the first time in his career. Hard to believe for a man who almost won last year's World Championship. Next to him, Eddie Irvine of Northern Ireland in the Jordan Peugeot, a full 1 second behind Hill in qualifying. Row 4 will be Johnny Herbert of Great Britain in the 2nd Benetton. He says the car is very nervous. Next to Herbert will be Rubens Barrichello of Brazil in the 2nd Jordan Peugeot. Row 5 will be the McLaren twins, Mika Hakkinen of Finland, alongside returning world champion Nigel Mansell, the worst qualifying performance from the McLaren duo in years. Row 6 will be Martin Brundle, making his '95 debut in the Ligier Mugen Honda. Next to him, Heinz-Harald Frentzen of Germany in the Sauber Ford. On row 7, Mika Salo of Finland in the Tyrrell, making his first visit to Catalunya. Next to him, Italian Gianni Morbidelli of Italy in the footwear cart. Row 8 will be Olivier Panis of France in the Ligier. And next to him, Jos Verstappen of the Netherlands with a great qualifying performance after a great drive at the San Marino Grand Prix 2 weeks ago. Row 9 will be Ukio Katayama of Japan in the second Tyrrell with Yamaha power. Next to him, his countryman Taki Inoue, his best qualifying performance in Formula One. Row 10 will be Pierluigi Martini of Italy in the second Minardi. Next to the second Sauber, driven by Karl Wendlinger of Austria. A lot of rumors swirling around this man this weekend. Row 11 will be Luca Badois of Italy in the second Minardi. Next to him, the Simtech Ford of Mimo Schiattarella of Italy. They've been suffering gearbox problems this weekend. Row 12 will be Andrea Montermini of Italy, returning to the track where he broke a leg last year in a crash in the Simtech. He's in the Pacific today. Next to him, his teammate Bertrand Gachot of France. And on our 13th and final row, Roberto Moreno of Brazil in the 4T Ford. Next to him, his teammate and countryman, Pedro Diniz. We'll take a look at the point standings coming in. As mentioned, Damon Hill on top of the Drivers' Championship by 6 over a tie between Michael Schumacher, the defending world champion, and Jean Alesi of Ferrari. David Coulthard and Gerhard Berger tied for 4th spot. In the Constructors' Championship, it is Ferrari in a tie with Williams-Renault. And that is a change from the numbers we left you with at Imola 2 weeks ago. It is a tie between Ferrari and Williams-Renault up top. Now, Derek Daly, let's talk a little bit about the daily news this weekend.
And there is plenty. Young Jacques Villeneuve, will he move to Formula One? His manager Craig Pollock is currently in discussion with Ferrari and Benetton, and they are trying to arrange a legitimate test. Eddie Irvine is in controversy again. In the Irish newspapers, it's reported that Eddie Jordan is unhappy with Irvine because he continues to find a way not to finish well. Jordan denies the reports. Benetton spent 3 days at Imola after the Grand Prix, and Schumacher made a statement afterwards. He believes he can now set the pace instead of having to follow it. Will Karl Wendlinger stay despite reports and denials by Peter Sauber that Wendlinger will move? There is gathering speculation that Karl Wendlinger is on borrowed time with Sauber. Schumacher and Ferrari, it is rumored they are prepared to invest as much as $28 million to get Schumacher away from a possible McLaren or a Mercedes contract and to move to Ferrari.
And in these days of driver salaries attempting to be rolled back by the teams, that is big news indeed. The race has been here at the Circuit de Catalunya for 4 years, and if you were going to win it, you've had to be in a Williams-Renault. Nigel Mansell has won it twice, Alain Prost in 1993, and in 1994, Damon Hill won. Let's talk a little bit about the changed racetrack here, Derek.
Well, this is 2.7 miles of a washboard-type surface that encompasses a wide variety of medium-speed corners, only one second-gear corner, and lots of elevation changes. Now, modification for this year features the elimination of that artificial tire chicane that you may remember from last season, and the elimination of the old and very fast Nissan chicane. This track, it tends to be physically very difficult and hard on tire wear.
In fact, the left front tire takes a tremendous pounding here, and the Ferrari team in particular is concerned about their tire wear. Goodyear C compounds in use by all of the teams, and they are projecting 2 pit stops. We apologize for problems with our world feed coming to us from Telecinco network in Spain. There's a new look at one of the onboard cameras. I don't think we've seen that view from atop the roll hoop before. You see the field coming around. A very warm, sunny day here in Spain and a huge crowd on hand. Spain has traditionally had trouble coming up with a full stadium for the visits by the Formula One fraternity, but there is a bumper crowd here today. We'll take a look at our race conditions as the field continues to move around. 74 degrees, but it seems hotter when you look at the crowd. A lot of shirts off out there. A light breeze from the southwest, very low humidity, which is traditional in very dry Spain, and virtually no chance of rain. The circuit was built back in 1989, a cooperative venture between the city of Montmeló, where the track resides, the Catalonian government, the regional government, and the Royal Automobile Club of Catalunya. The nose camera on Michael Schumacher's car. Once again, we apologize for the color mismatch and so forth. We'll try to get the situation corrected.
Everything started this F1 season as blue. Most of the cars were blue, and everything today, as you can see, is virtually green. Good old Irish green for Formula One.
That's a car being pushed back. I didn't get a number on that. I don't know whose car that was. In fact, I didn't see a driver sitting in it, which may be good news for whoever it was, because as you can see, the field is coming into position. A gentle rise on this long front straightaway. That was Eddie Irvine's Jordan. The racing line is on the right of your picture, so as you can see, the cars will stay on it until the last possible moment. The cars on the left side column, led by Jean Alesi, will have the dirtier part of the racetrack and a much more difficult time finding traction when the green light comes on. We're in position. Turn it up and enjoy a Formula One standing start. A long wait, red light. And I didn't see the green, but when the red light goes out, the race is on. And a great start for Michael Schumacher. Jean Alesi just behind him. David Coulthard and Gerhard Berger contesting the third spot. Tight right-hander coming up. A novel look at the reigning world champion in his Benetton Renault. And now an uphill climb.
And a clean start by everybody, but Schumacher went immediately to block the outside of that front row, realized he got a good start, got the traction to the road, moved back onto the racing line, and now they begin to fall back into line. Ferrari chases Schumacher.
Now the cars run downhill to the Wörth corner. They'll make a left-hander and climb to the newest corner on the racetrack. Right here, new pavement, cutting out the very tight Nissan chicane and adding, hopefully, a new passing area on this long straightaway down to the corner known as La Caixa.
Second or third gear, depending what you like. The only team here with the 7-speed gearbox is the Jordan. They use third. Long, long, long winding right-hander. These are the type of corners Ron Dennis said does not suit the McLaren car. Suits everybody else. Mika Hakkinen having his worst ever qualifying, and then a blast on the corner with no name down this long front straight. 192 miles an hour in qualifying.
Michael Schumacher already beginning to draw away. Schumacher said his car was virtually undrivable on Friday, but in Saturday he came back and pasted Jean Alesi, the provisional pole sitter for Ferrari, by 0.6 of a second, and that's a lot in Formula One.
And it was a surprise to Schumacher even to be that much faster. Another look at the start. Watch Schumacher. As soon as he gets the rear wheels with traction, he goes to block Alesi. Blocks Alesi. Now he's got him taken care of. Realizes he's a car length ahead. And he begins to move back onto the correct racing line to get the braking zone on the black tire groove into that first corner.
There is Jean Alesi in the blue-green Ferrari. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher flashes down to the La Caixa corner once again.
He's been off the road this weekend again. In fact, he's beginning to get annoyed at people suggesting that under pressure, he seems to leave the road quite often. He says pressure did not cause him to go off the road at Imola, although it was a driver error, he now says. He said it wasn't under pressure. However, a major setup change on Friday brought this car to prominence. But remember what he said after Imola. He just felt they understand this car much better than they have in the first 3 races.
65 laps of racing scheduled. 2 are complete, and Michael Schumacher draws away to a 1.6-second lead over Alesi. Damon Hill, Gerhard Berger, Eddie Irvine, and Mika Hakkinen moving up in the McLaren. We'll be back. Welcome back live to the Grand Prix of Spain. Bob Varsha, Derek Daly with you. There you see Jean Alesi in his Ferrari running second in the race right now. Michael Schumacher steadily drawing away from the field, returning to the racetrack where a year ago he had one of the most remarkable Grand Prix drives I can recall, driving much of the race stuck in 5th gear, and he still managed to pass cars and finish second to Damon Hill.
And look where his teammate is, Johnny Herbert, still struggling to match the pace of Michael Schumacher. There were suggestions that Schumacher was blocking Herbert's access. Look at Nigel Mansell all the way back to 15. Hakkinen has come forward and Mansell has gone backwards. But there were suggestions that Schumacher was blocking access to the data acquisition and the telemetry readouts from Schumacher's car. He said, no, that's not the case, but Johnny Herbert is not having a happy time in that second seat of the Benetton.
In fact, Herbert says even when Schumacher does go quicker, I'm assuming that he's improving the car, so even if I go with his settings, that car doesn't suit my driving style, so I'm going to have to do my own thing with the Benetton team. All a part of the psychological and physical problem of being teammate to an outstanding driver such as Michael Schumacher. Now, we understand that the picture as you're seeing it has improved somewhat. On our end, unfortunately, it has not, so we may have a little trouble identifying cars. Please bear with us. Right now, the race is all Michael Schumacher, who has pulled out to a strong lead over the number 27 of Jean Alesi. Gerhard Berger runs back in the 4th spot behind Damon Hill, who now begins to close up just a little bit on Alesi. Riding, excuse me, this is David Coulthard that you ride with now. Made his debut in Formula One on this circuit 1 year ago, so now he has made the complete loop of Formula One circuits. And he will be running in familiar territory most of the way. Of course, the European Grand Prix scheduled for October at the Nürburgring in Germany will be unfamiliar to just about everyone.
Chasing Berger. Didn't start off well. Difficult to balance this car between medium and high-speed corners, but look at the run now he has.
Now we go to a replay of the 40 course cars. Big problem there for Roberto Moreno, the vastly more experienced member of the team. That team is struggling with a car that's more than 100 pounds over the minimum weight. They say they're going to get it down for Monaco with some new pieces. They have a new aerodynamic treatment this weekend, particularly the engine cover and the rear diffuser, but they are still badly undermanned.
That's Eddie Irvine that David Coulthard is in fact chasing. Three-tenths of a second. I think it's closer than that now. Eddie Irvine, who says, don't let the Jordan team think that they have the pace of Formula One handle. It's a lot more to winning in Grand Prix racing than just bolting in a good engine. He says we have a long way to go before we are legitimate challengers to win Grand Prix races.
It's interesting how the tide swings. In his previous 5 seasons or so, Eddie Jordan's team was the model of efficiency. Only about 60, 80 people in the factory across from the Silverstone circuit in England. Everybody said they were doing wonderful things. Now they have the manufacturer engine deal with Peugeot. Whoa! Coulthard makes the move. Going down the inside under the pedestrian bridge. Oh, this could be close at the corner.
There's the V10 of the Renault versus the V10 of the Peugeot. And David Coulthard almost brings a smile to Frank's face. Frank isn't known to smile very often, even when his drivers win. But at least David Coulthard, having dropped back in the first 5 laps, now beginning to make his way.
Getting back to my Jordan story, now they are considered to be one of the leading teams. They've shown the pace in testing. Everybody's wondering what's wrong with Jordan rather than remarking on the tremendous job they're doing. And Eddie Irvine says we are understaffed. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough space. We need a full R&D test team. We don't have it. We're having to do all of our own testing, and we won't get much better until we do. So your reputation changes quickly in Formula One. Now there's Jean Alesi as we move back to the battle for second place. Michael Schumacher has simply checked out.
Leans on that left front tire. That is the one that takes the severe beating here. This racetrack that was surfaced just before last year's race has suddenly got this huge washboard rippling effect that is almost unnerving to the drivers. Not just bumps, but this rippling effect is something that shock absorbers are working very, very hard to control this weekend. Ooh.
Damon Hill looks down the inside of Jean Alesi at the same corner where Nigel Mansell had an electrifying pass on Ayrton Senna just a few seasons ago. Those were other battles, though. This is 1995 as you look back at Damon Hill as he draws up once again on Jean Alesi. We'll take a quick timeout and return for more of round 4 of the World Driving Championship. Stay with us. We are back live at round 4 of the World Driving Championship, the Grand Prix of Spain. There is Michael Schumacher going out of sight. Here's a replay from Spanish TV. Looks like one of the Tyrrells getting 2 wheels up over the international curbing and onto the dirt.
Right ahead of Nigel Mansell, who continues to struggle and is moving his way backwards instead of forwards. Mansell very, very unhappy with the handling of that McLaren this weekend. Said armfuls of understeer and then suddenly armfuls of oversteer.
Mansell says, I love to dive deeply into a corner, and with the front end aerodynamics on this car, I simply can't do it. The car won't turn. In fact, Nigel pulled out one of the computer printouts to show that he is on the throttle 100% more often than his teammate Mika Hakkinen, yet he is slower around the racetrack. A little taste of 12-cylinder Ferrari power there.
And unfortunately, it is just a little taste. We would like to ride a full lap with him, but he's under pressure right now, keeping an eye on his mirrors. And these boys keep an eye on the monitors. They have their television monitors high above, which they use as their scoring monitor also. And they watch their man run away from everybody.
From time to time, as we look into the pits, you'll see that the teams are uniformed and ready to go, because given the tire wear problems here in Barcelona, they could have to hop to it at any moment. They simply can't be sure of when their driver is suddenly going to need a new set of tires, particularly, as Derek mentioned, the left front with all these strong right-hand turns. Once again, in the Williams garage. I wonder if Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger ever got their Ferrari road cars back that were stolen on the Friday at San Marino 2 weeks ago.
See the Ferrari bottoms out. Pit stops are expected, believe it or not, in about 5 to 6 laps time. So pit stops coming early. Everybody will at least make one because there isn't enough fuel tank capacity any longer to go the full length as we go inside with Gerhard Berger. Let's listen.
We're not getting the proper audio feed from Spanish TV. Back to the battle for second, Alesi and Hill.
Berger and Alesi say these are the best Ferraris for many seasons, and they think they do need some more horsepower, despite the fact that that 17,000 plus RPM V12 pumps out, a lot of people believe, more horsepower than everybody else. Already Schumacher lapping the 240 cars. There's Roberto Moreno gathering himself up after that early spin, but Alesi's still under pressure from Damon Hill, who said, oh, look at it get sideways under power.
Look into the Ferrari garage. That V10 engine that we talked about at the Grand Prix of San Marino getting closer and closer to the dynamometers. The big question is, will we see it in 1995? Team manager Jean Todt says, no, I don't think so. But you never know. As you said at Imola, Derek, if it suddenly produces gobs of horsepower, it could go into this chassis. John Barnard, who designed it, says it can take either the V12 or the V10. Ooh, close moment there for Damon Hill.
Championship battle will be a big struggle. Part of his struggle started at the 3-day test at Imola after the last race, when Damon Hill went off the road and had an almighty crash in this FW17. So they didn't have a very productive test. On the other hand, Schumacher had an extremely good test, which gave him a lot of confidence coming here. Now he shows the benefits of that test.
40 course, I believe that's Pedro Diniz of Brazil. Doing some inadvertent blocking there. That gives Jean Alesi a little bit of breathing space. Damon Hill momentarily balked. There's Michael Schumacher. Tight uphill section. Now this long downhill right-hander. Incredible corner.
Benetton examined the data acquisition and the readouts from Schumacher's race car at Imola to see did they in fact have a mechanical failure that caused him to fly off the road into the barrier and out of the race, and there was nothing wrong. So Schumacher is happy to accept driver error, thinking that he did maybe go too fast on cold tires. And Damon Hill, we are told, will be in on the next lap, which may suggest that he believes he's been held up by a Lacey's Ferrari.
Probably a pit stop in the near future for this man as well. Benetton not afraid to go with a 3-stop pit strategy. The idea being to keep fresh rubber on the car, keep the fuel load light, let Michael Schumacher work his magic. And of course, Benetton pit stops are very, very quick.
Schumacher has a tendency to run this car a bit like a go-kart. Very stiff and very nervous. And when his teammates come into the team and try and match his pace and try and sap off his information on his car setup, it seems to make them worse. In fact, no driver yet has been able to drive a Benetton with the same setup as Schumacher and get anywhere nearer than 5 or 6 tenths of a second to Schumacher.
You ride the nose of Schumacher's Benetton as he passes the pit entrance. "13 laps complete. The race going down at a wicked pace. Shauna Lacey almost a full 8 seconds behind now. Pit stop in the Williams garage. This is Damon Hill. Wheels on very, very quickly. But you'd expect to see something more in the 7 to 8 second range.
That suggests that he took on a lot of fuel. In the 7 or 8 second range, you usually begin to indicate that you will make at least 2 more stops. That may indicate with a 10-second stop, if it was efficient and they got fuel in for 10 seconds, that he might try and make it on just 1 more stop.
There's a 75-mile-an-hour pit lane speed limit, and the people from Tag Heuer Timing have a new system in place. They use sensors in the actual pit lane rather than a radar gun to determine car speed, and they are enforcing that pit lane speed limit rigorously. There were 6 stop-and-go penalties at Imola for excessive speed in the pit lane.
Quick glimpse there of the McLaren boys going through the motions. You can only call it going through the motions because they are nowhere near the pace in Grand Prix racing anymore. Last season was winless for McLaren, and this season, unless a miracle happens, will be no better.
First time in more than a decade that McLaren was without a win. Now David Coulthard heads for the Williams pit. As a result, Gerhard Berger moves up into 3rd spot on Damon Hill's pit stop. There is the fuel hose. There has been another modification of the refueling apparatus and a very, very quick stop for Coulthard. 2.5 seconds quicker than what Damon Hill had, and that is an eternity. You heard the engine ratcheting as he went by on the rev limiter for the pit lane speed.
So he either had a much faster pit stop or he simply took on less fuel, which allowed him to have that faster pit stop.
Coming up on Bertrand Gachot in the Pacific. Notice the air intake just above Michael Schumacher's head. This Benetton air intake was designed for the 1995 regulations that called for a vent on the back of that hood scoop in order to reduce the ram air effect into the engine. Well, following the Grand Prix of Argentina, the FIA, the international governing body, said we cannot control it, so everybody can close them back up again. Well, that did no good to this team. They had designed it for the opening, so now Benetton says they're not getting all the air into the engine that they need, and as a result, it is hurting their performance. But the roll hoop is incorporated into the design, so in order to fix it, they're going to have to redesign the back end of the car from the driver's seat back and graft on, essentially, a whole new rear of the chassis. A tremendous and costly undertaking. Michael Schumacher leads. We'll take a quick time out and return for more of the Grand Prix of Spain from Catalunya. Stay with us. Back live at the Grand Prix of Spain, Michael Schumacher continues to lap traffic. He has one of the Simtech cars just ahead. That's Mimo Schiattarella. Gerhard Berger just pitted the Ferrari from third spot. Got a good, quick 7-second stop.
Right behind Schiattarella, that was Karl Wendlinger. Continuing to have a bad day in the Sauber, struggling to keep up with the Simtech. Remember, that is the factory works Ford engine in that Sauber, and not showing well, that package.
In fact, Ford has sent an engineer of its own to help with chassis development on that car. There's Pedro Diniz in the pits in the 40 course machine. Old technology by contemporary Formula One standards, but they're working on it. Schumacher maintaining a 7.5-second lead over Jean Alesi. The difference being Alesi has yet to pit his Ferrari. Schumacher has already been in once.
One of the problems the Benetton mechanics have had with this particular car is an engine change takes such a long time. It's a very difficult car to work on as Mika Häkkinen rolls to a stop and almost looked as if he was going to run over the Jackman at the front.
A pretty breathtaking pace, I would have to say. That Jackman is the bravest man in the pit lane.
Look at this. Can't get the fuel hose. This is the longest pit stop we've seen yet, 11.5. Mansell had come in and was out in 7.6. Ron Dennis, one of the advocates for banning refueling, as he passed Rubens Barrichello in the Jordan pit.
And ironic, because it is McLaren that spent a great deal of time developing their refueling system and making recommendations as to how to fix that quick release on the refueling system. They've replaced the interior pipe on the tubing because they found that it was expanding and contracting depending on what kind of fuel was in it. And now McLaren suffers the first problem that we've seen with the refueling process. As far as I'm concerned, they can take as long as they want, as long as they don't splash it anywhere.
And here's Nigel Mansell about to get lapped again. You saw him lapped at Imola, and there's not even 20 laps gone in this race. And Nigel Mansell about to get lapped by Michael Schumacher. Just look at the pace difference between the Benetton and the McLaren. Absolutely blew his doors off. What a shambles this McLaren has been all weekend here. And how can McLaren International and Mercedes-Benz continue without doing something very serious in a design change mode to make this car a lot better?
Johnny Herbert pits from fourth spot in the Benetton. Getting back to the McLaren for a moment, Ron Dennis has had several very terse interviews. And what are those things on the ground there, Derek?
Simply to a grounding system to ground out the car while they refuel it.
Ron Dennis admits that the McLaren cannot win races in its present form. He's had a couple of very testy press conferences in which he's tried to explain the problem, fending off references allegedly attributed to the drivers that the car will take a major redesign. Ron says no one is qualified to make that statement until we know what the problem is. We don't have any idea what the solution might be, but definitely bleak times right now for McLaren. In fact, Norbert Haag from Mercedes says it may be 4 or 5 months before their engine is on a par with the powerful V10 of Renault.
And in 4 or 5 months' time, the season is virtually over. McLaren, who have a bigger checkbook than everybody else, and Alesi running second, brings the Ferrari in.
As you saw, Johnny Herbert was up to third before his pit. Word from the racetrack is that Mansell has swapped in somewhere out there. Telecinco has not shown us that yet. He is apparently back underway. Look at the elaborate front-end treatment aerodynamically on that Ferrari.
Guide the airflow around that front wheel and that front suspension. That's what all those turning vanes are. And as Alesi shoots back out onto the racetrack, Mansell, having just had that spin, has made his way back to his pit.
And he has climbed out. Nigel Mansell is finished for the day. From 22nd spot, so obviously Mansell was going backwards from the green light. You saw a mechanic checking the front suspension parts. Front end problems continue for Nigel Mansell. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher rockets along.
Nigel didn't even go to the test at Imola. In fact, he hasn't tested since they built that wider, bigger monocoque because they're afraid if anything happens, they won't have enough cars available for Monaco. Of course, Monaco running between the concrete walls and the Armco tends to use up monocoques more than any other racetrack, and they want to make sure they have enough of a complement for Häkkinen and for Nigel Mansell.
Having disposed of the Minardi, Michael Schumacher continues on his merry way. We'll be back for more live from Barcelona. You ride with Michael Schumacher, and I must correct myself. I thought Schumacher had already pitted, but he had not. Michael Schumacher has just completed his first pit stop, and he remains in first place over Jean Alesi and Damon Hill unofficially.
And it was 8.2 seconds, so it was a good pit stop. Mansell on his excursion off the racetrack and through the gravel trap damaged the front suspension of that McLaren, so the downhill spiral continues. And with Mansell, if you don't stop that downhill run very quickly, things have a habit of going from bad to worse to disastrous.
We apologize if your pictures aren't everything we would like them to be. Schumacher dicing through traffic.
Good look at the crowd all through this long right-hander.
A lot more shifting going on there than I might have expected. Onto the front straightaway.
The Ferrari rumor of $28 million being available for Schumacher is beginning to catch people by surprise, because most people had assumed he was already signed to move to Mercedes-Benz and McLaren. Perhaps when he sees the performance of the McLaren, he might have second thoughts. Maybe he is a free agent, unavailable and on the market for next season.
Well, in answer to that very question, he said, why would I make a deal already for McLaren, which was the rumor, when the Benetton runs as well as it does relative to the McLaren? And of course, that makes a lot of sense. There you see the running order.
Down to the top 18, and Martin Brundle was not in that list. We saw Olivier Panis is still in it, but Brundle, who had an exceptional qualifying effort in his first Grand Prix, all the way back in 19th place. So he's either been off the racetrack or he has a handful.
Also saw Jos Verstappen running behind his Simtech teammate Mimo Schiatarella. We wouldn't expect that, but perhaps Verstappen went behind on a pit stop.
Three different chassis manufacturers and three different engines in the top three positions. And Eddie Irvine obviously has slipped out of that top six, because at one stage we saw him ahead of David Coulthard, and now he's disappeared.
Michael Schumacher turning in an astonishing performance here when you consider the way the Benetton Renault was running earlier this year. He is simply driving away from the Williams team of Damon Hill and David Coulthard. Gerhard Berger in the Ferrari.
Nigel Mansell is reported to have said that something went wrong in the steering. It didn't feel right, it felt funny, and that contributed to his gravel trap experience. And of course, we'll have to go back and have a look. Top of the hill, you see the elevation changes. Bit of a scramble ahead of him, slows him down.
That is Martin Brundle and Ligier right there. Brundle will get 8 races in the car. Aguri Suzuki will get 8 races. Olivier Panis will run the entire season for Ligier.
And this Ligier with the Mugen Honda V10 continues to suffer from overheating problems because it runs so hot. Honda say they can only use 14,800 revs. If they can get the engine to cool down, it can go all the way to 16,000. Although it looks like a blue Benetton, it's not identical. The track, wheelbase and gearbox are identical, however, but Charlie Whiting from the FIA said he did examine the Benetton and the Ligier, and they are very different in almost every way, although visually similar.
I don't know who the young lady in the Ferrari garage was, but apparently she's related to our Spanish director. She's getting more face time than any of us. We'll be right back. Back live at the Grand Prix of Spain, Michael Schumacher leads Damon Hill, Johnny Herbert, David Coulthard. Herbert has another pit stop coming up. Gerhard Berger, who just made his stop, and Mika Hakkinen, who was also stopped recently. They passed the halfway mark in this 65-lap race on a warm day about 10 miles outside the city of Barcelona.
And Johnny Herbert, although he runs in third place at the moment, has not made his second pit stop, so we do expect him to pull out a line that will give David Coulthard back that rostrum position. Still bad audio coming from Berger's car. Now about to put a lap on. Mika Salo and Hakkinen chases the two Finns either side of Berger.
There's a long week of testing coming up following this event. Ron Dennis says McLaren will be here all week as they try to come up with some kind of a solution. The next race is the Grand Prix of Monte Carlo in Monaco, a circuit that allows no mistakes whatsoever. And if they truly have front-end problems and big understeer in the McLaren, that is not the place you want to take the car.
That's right. Benetton, McLaren, Sauber, and Williams, and Jordan, I believe, are also going to stay on here for an extensive test session. That McLaren has more than just a front-end problem. There's an imbalance in that car that's causing it to understeer and oversteer. They can never quite find the sweet spot. Mansell does not like the car. When he doesn't like the car, he doesn't want to test the car. But the reason they want to stay on here is because this circuit exaggerates their problem. So if they can identify it here, perhaps they will be in better shape for the rest of the season.
There you see the cars out of the race to date. Alesi and Mansell dominant among them. This is for 5th place. Gerhard Berger being hunted by Mika Hakkinen, who has to get around his countryman Mika Salo. As we mentioned before, the two Mikas are not great friends. There you see Hakkinen in the red and white McLaren going around Salo.
And Tyrrell not having a good day at all. They have so many high expectations for this team with Mika Salo as he moves out of the way to let Gerhard Berger slide down the inside. I believe that was Katayama.
There's another look at it.
In slow motion, it looks so easy. Unfortunately, television makes racing in general look a lot easier than it is.
Get a brief look at Taki Inoue in the footwork car. There are rumors that Jackie Oliver's footwork team will be sold to a Formula 3000 team owner, David Sears. I mentioned earlier the results of yesterday's Formula 3000 race here at Barcelona. First and second place cars race for the Supernova team, and they are in the frame, we are told, to buy the footwork team and advance to Formula 1 next year. There's the footwork.
Using the Hart V8 engine. Many people think the Hart V8 engine is in fact more powerful than the Ford V8 engine. Brian Hart, of course, runs a budget smaller than virtually every other engine company here in Formula 1. Has never quite managed to get a manufacturer to back him, but the V10 that he had in that Jordan car was certainly impressive, and this V8 has done nothing but enhance Brian Hart's considerable reputation.
No question about it. A former racer himself with the tiniest of staffs, just a dozen people or so, Brian Hart continues to work horsepower miracles. I'm with you, Derek. I do not understand why a major manufacturer hasn't gone to him to tap that expertise for one of their multi-million-dollar engine programs.
And a bit of a family tradition with Brian Hart. His brother is one of the designers of his engine projects.
We expect Johnny Herbert to bring the Benetton in momentarily. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher has lengthened his lead to more than 35 seconds, so he can easily afford another pit stop without giving up the lead. Pulls up behind one of the yellow Forte course cars.
That's Roberto Moreno, who still sees his future in IndyCar racing. He is happy to stay with the Forte course team while they sort these cars out, but his heart still lies in America, still has the desire to be employed by an IndyCar team.
IndyCar's coming up later today here on ESPN as we bring you time trials from the biggest race of all, the Indianapolis 500. It will be live later today. Perhaps some of these drivers will be watching. Old friends such as Gilles de Ferran. 12:30 Eastern Time here on ESPN. There's the Benetton pit making ready for Johnny Herbert.
Just look at the fire protection these mechanics now have to wear for this refueling. Definitely has become more aggravation than it was ever worth, and the argument is still out as to whether it has improved the show or not. I mean, you see very little passing on the racetrack in Formula One. Most of the passing still takes place in the pit lane, but there is an argument now that says it will get banned in the future. What an expensive exercise they had to go through. But they seem to reverse these rules quite often, just like the airbox. They design an airbox rule, everybody changes their cars, then they change the rule, and they change back again. Now it looks like they'll do the same thing for next season with refueling.
There's Johnny Herbert into the Benetton pit. 15, 16 crewmen go to work. 3 men on each tire. There is the controversial fueling valve. Oh, and he goes with the jack. He has the jack behind him. Let's see if they get him stopped. That could be lethal if it detaches from the cars. It does, but I think he made it to the end of the pit lane, and that is miraculous.
Some of the mechanics that saw what was going on there down the pit lane began to run for cover in case that thing did detach and become a flying object. But happily, Johnny Herbert, I wonder is there a penalty for that? I don't know whether there is or not. I doubt it. But that could have been a projectile that could have done serious damage, and Flavio Briatore is not impressed at all. But Johnny Herbert was on the gas just as soon as that car dropped, and look, he just can't quite get that jack out. Whoa, he tows a trailer down the pit lane, and there's everybody runs for cover.
It doesn't take long for everyone to realize there's a problem.
Oh, I wonder will there be a redesign of that to make sure that doesn't happen again. We've never seen that in F1. A jack doing, well, it only does 75 miles an hour, which is the speed limit here. And then it detaches. Herbert may have never known.
Well, Pierluigi Martini, who came under fire at Imola for holding up Damon Hill, now runs in front of Michael Schumacher, and I think Schumacher just waved his fist at him. Watch your mirrors, let me by. There he goes. And Martini tucks in just behind. So a frightening moment here at the Grand Prix of Spain. Nothing ruffles the feathers of Michael Schumacher as he leads away. They now have a jack back in the Benetton pit. Back live into the pit lane in Catalonia at about 150 miles an hour, then dropping to 75. Race leader Michael Schumacher will have a revised jack at the rear of the car as he makes his pit stop. Making quite sure to get that jack off the back of the car. I can't believe that Johnny Herbert will not be penalized for leaving with the jack attached to his Benetton.
You could clearly see the jackman at the back was really careful to get 2 hands on that jack and drag the bottom hand out to get that jack away from the gearbox mounting plates on that Benetton. So last week at Imola, we saw the Ferrari have the fastest gearbox in F1. We now know who has the fastest jack in F1.
Now here's a man who needs the fastest lap in F1. Damon Hill with Michael Schumacher coming out on fresh tires with a full load of fuel. Has to nail him now. Not pass him necessarily, but he has to make time. Has to try to catch him.
A worry for Williams that Benetton seems to have closed the gap and in fact gone ahead, just like Schumacher predicted they would after that test at Imola All V10 Renault engines in the top 3 at the moment. David Coulthard not on the pace with Damon Hill. Matching him in qualifying and in practice, but in race conditions, not quite able to match his team leader.
Let's take a look at our Haviland race recap. The race leader is Michael Schumacher, right there, who has led every lap since the green light. Cars out of the race, Nigel Mansell with suspension and steering problems. Andrea Montermini, Pedro Diniz, Luca Badoer, Jean Olacy blew the engine in his Ferrari. But that is pretty light attrition for a Formula One race. Of the 26 starters, 21 remain circulating on the racetrack. This is the 5th locale for the Grand Prix of Spain. The U.S. Grand Prix has been the most nomadic, going to 8 different sites. Grand Prix of France has visited 7 different racetracks, and Spain is 3rd with 5, including a road circuit in Montjuic Park in downtown Barcelona, where the race was held until 1975, when Rolf Stommelen had a crash that fatally injured 4 spectators, and that was the end of the Spanish Grand Prix in the Barcelona area. In fact, Damon Hill took a Williams Renault to Montjuic Park and ran it up and down to the delight of a huge crowd. When I say Damon Hill, David Coulthard took the Williams, drove it up and down, and said, this place looks like it could hold a race once again. The streets are wide, very, very smooth. But given the money they spent to build this circuit here in Catalonia, in the town of Montmeló, moving over 1 million cubic yards of dirt, not likely that the race is going to go anywhere in the near future. There you see the gap from Schumacher to Hill. As Hill tries to make time, he probably has another pit stop coming up. He has to close as much as possible and then hope for a great stop.
High nose and full front wing on this Williams. The advantage, of course, is more wing area, because last year you could wind up the front wings and you caused a lot of turbulent air behind. However, it didn't matter because you had the turning vanes to clean the air up. You can no longer have those turning vanes as Taki Inoue takes one of those blown up Hart V12s into the pit, but you can no longer use those turning vanes. Therefore, more wing frontal area was the reason that Williams went to this high nose setup.
Mika Hakkinen makes his way around in the McLaren Mercedes. He is in the points here in Spain. Back live in Spain as Damon Hill exits the pits with what should be his final stop of this Grand Prix of Spain. He pitted from 2nd spot behind this man, Michael Schumacher, who remains the unchallenged leader of this race since the green light.
Unchallenged indeed. Over 7 seconds before Damon Hill made that stop, as Katayama begins to make provisions, let's hope, for moving out of the way. But have a look at this replay. Watch the fuel vent. It bursts into flames right there. There's our 2nd fuel fire of this refueling season of Formula One, and Bertrand Gachot recognizes it immediately and pulls off. Eddie Irvine comes in, having been in the points again, running 6th. Now he has to beat Mika Hakkinen on the racetrack, and he had caught Hakkinen. Oh, you hear that ratcheting effect from the Peugeot V10. I mentioned earlier that the Hart was a V12. Of course, in fact, it was a V8. Perhaps after the hand grenade went off, it was a V12.
Split a few of those 8 cylinders. Now David Coulthard assumes 2nd place on teammate Damon Hill's pit stop. He is 20 seconds down, but he too has another pit stop to come.
3rd and 4th gear corner here. Long right-hander destroying that left front. David Coulthard, no sooner did he take 2nd place than he has to make a stop. Good stop last turn. Remember, it was in the 7s and 8s. Good again, 7.9.
Getting back to that Bertrand Gachot fire, it appeared that the fire started underneath the car because it was flaming badly out the back. And as Derek mentioned, he pulled off at the end of the pit exit and was immediately jumped on by the fire marshals. But that is our second pit fire, and more fuel on the fire, if you will, surrounding refueling in Formula One. The controversy will go on. As Ron Dennis of McLaren says, there is no question. The mathematics are simple. There will be an accident using refueling in Formula One. The question is, how big will it be, and how will we all react to it?
Tom Walkinshaw, of course, who was the technical director, or the director of engineering for Benetton, has in fact moved away from this team now and gone on to run the Ligier car. That's of course why there was such an influence in design for that new Ligier, but Benetton have not missed a beat. Walkinshaw, of course, largely credited with bringing or guiding this team to a lot of last year's success. However, the designer that Tom Walkinshaw brought to Benetton, Ross Brawn, is still the head, still the chief designer here.
The Ferrari team awaits their man, Gerhard Berger, obviously with a pit stop in his future. You mentioned the Peugeot engine earlier as we watched Eddie Irvine go out. Guy Audu, the engineer in charge of engine development at Peugeot, says the engines are built by teams of 2 assemblers, and the assemblers are matched by personality. A younger man with an older man, a veteran with a rookie. Much like 2-man fighter pilot teams, Peugeot matches their assemblers by personality in order to get the best engines out of them, which is kind of interesting.
Berger with that phenomenal Ferrari gearbox. There's the rain light on, just in case it begins to rain here in Spain.
Had to get that one in before the day was over. Now Ruben Barrichello. The Jordan team got its first finish of the year with Eddie Irvine's 8th place at Imola 2 weeks ago. Rubens Barrichello says the team is just devastated by his performance this year. He desperately needs the psychological lift that a mere finish would get him.
Barrichello just not the driver he was before Imola last season. He definitely puts pressure on himself, and that pressure is slowing him down at the moment, not making him faster. But the man on a mission right now is Berger, who wants another rostrum position for this Ferrari. They still are not on the pace. They are still not fast enough, but he's got to give that position up as he peels off. Look at the speed he peels off even down the pit lane. He doesn't have to start his speed limit till right there. Right there you see him jump on the brakes. And now the 75-mile-an-hour limit.
David Coulthard has gone by. David Hill has gone by. Another quick stop for Ferrari.
And no fuel spill. We got a good look from the onboard camera there, completely dry as he pulled it away. The Pacific of Gasho obviously left a fuel trail out of the fuel valve all the way back through the bodywork and down under the car as Niki Lauda takes a minute to give his expertise on what's going on.
Niki Lauda had very hard words for the management of Formula One at the sanctioning body level, the FIA under President Max Mosley, saying the decision to reverse the judgment of the stewards at Brazil, the season opening event in which the fuel used in the Benetton and the Williams was found to be out of specification, not necessarily illegal, but out of specification. Michael Schumacher, the winner of the race, was disqualified, as was runner-up David Coulthard right there. But on appeal, their points were restored. The points were kept from the teams, however. Gerhard, in the view of Niki Lauda, that was separating driver and car, which has never happened before in Formula One, even in remarkably similar circumstances. He said that was a sham and that the FIA has lost control of Formula One, created a huge fuss. David Coulthard goes around Pierluigi Martini in the Minardi.
Still retains that youthful enthusiasm for racing and Formula One, the type that we saw Schumacher have until about last season. I wonder how long will David Coulthard retain that smile and that bounce and that enthusiasm that Formula One seems to sap from these young drivers.
It is a very difficult way to make a very lucrative living. We'll be back live to Barcelona. Back in Spain, Tires beginning to light at many of the corners. David Coulthard has been lighting them up in a desperate effort to catch up with his teammate Damon Hill and race leader Michael Schumacher. Johnny Herbert runs 4th, 5th, Eddie Irvine in the Jordan, 6th, Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren. Then Rubens Barrichello, Olivier Panis, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen round out the top 10. Martin Brundle's 11th, Mika Salo in the Tyrrell 12th, Jos Verstappen 13th, Gianni Morbidelli 14th, Ukio Katayama 15th. Ferrari team relaxing. Gerhard Berger still in the race. Shauna Lacey blew his engine and has dropped out. Berger should be able to go the rest of the way. There may be splash and go pit stops late in this race.
David Coulthard, of course, who was so heavily criticized after Imola by Shauna Lacey. Lacey saying it was the most unprofessional driving he had seen for a long time. When David Coulthard heard the remark that Lacey made, he made his way straight down to the Ferrari motorhome, accompanied by his manager. They went inside, words were exchanged, and David Coulthard came out and said it's now been all sorted out. So it didn't explode into a public argument, but Lacey was not impressed. However, the driver said that they worked it out among themselves and didn't need to wash any dirty linen in public.
Quick look at Frank Williams watching his cars circulate.
I quite honestly thought Coulthard did a superb job at Imola. There's no way he should have made things easy for Shauna Lacey. Remember, they were fighting for rostrum positions. That's what racing is all about.
And David Coulthard did handle it quite professionally. In the minds of many, Formula One could do with a big dose of that, not washing your linen in public. Like the fuel problem in Brazil, for example. Press releases were issued before the race by the FIA saying there's a problem with the fuel of Schumacher, or of the Benettons and the Williams cars at that point. Remarkable action.
Get to sample and get a look at Michael Schumacher's driving style. Now, for somebody so fast, you would imagine his style may be termed as aggressive in the car. Believe it or not, Johnny Herbert said his style, Herbert's style, is more aggressive than Schumacher. Schumacher is easier on the initial movements of the steering wheel. He's got a more gentle movement. Perhaps that's why he can set this car up to be very twitchy, because his natural reaction as Hakkinen takes the McLaren in running 9th. His exhaust pipe, believe it or not, had just fallen off that car, and that was obviously the forerunner to the rest of the mechanical gremlins. So although Mansell was out earlier with a suspension problem, it looks like Hakkinen is out with an engine problem.
And somebody else off on the left side of the track there. I guess our Spanish cameraman decided it wasn't worth paying any attention to. There goes Eddie Irvine. It's David Coulthard. Now we get it in replay.
Smokes it down under braking, and then something blows up big time.
We rarely, very rarely, see the Renault V10 let go. We went seasons before we saw one go when the Williams team was the works effort. But now David Coulthard has lost one. A dramatic turn. We'll be back for more from Barcelona. Ride with Michael Schumacher as he goes around the 5th place car of Eddie Irvine. Schumacher has lapped all but the top 4 cars, or the top 3 cars that are on the lead lap with him. It is Schumacher, Hill, Herbert. Johnny Herbert on the podium. Good for him. Gerhard Berger runs 4th in the Ferrari. Eddie Irvine 5th. And Rubens Barrichello is 6th. So both Jordans are in the points right now. What a lift for that team it would be if they can both finish that way.
And what a dose of confidence it would be for Johnny Herbert if he can keep this intact. Because nothing gives a driver more confidence than just being repaid with results for all the hard work that you put in. Sometimes hard work does not get rewarded in motorsports, as the Benetton boys continue to look on, hoping that their 2 cars for the first time this year can continue and be in the points. Frank looks worried.
One of his cars is out of the race. As that list of cars out came up on the screen, you saw the 2 most recent. David Coulthard and Mika Hakkinen, both of whom were running in the points at the time. Running 7th right now is Olivier Panis as you get aboard with Gerhard Berger in the Ferrari running 4th. Panis is 7th. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is 8th. Martin Brundle now 9th. Mika Salo in the Tyrrell is 10th. Then Gianni Morbidelli in the footwork. Jos Verstappen in the Simtek. A finish would be good for that team. Ukio Katayama in the Tyrrell. Carl Wendlinger in the Sauber. Pierluigi Martini's Minardi. And those are the key cars still in action right now through 15. Down to the Wörth corner. Uphill, left and right flick. Pretty steeply uphill. We'll take another time out and return live to the Grand Prix of Spain. Stay with us. Back in Spain, Michael Schumacher threatening. Will almost certainly pick up his second Grand Prix victory of 1995. Damon Hill runs 2nd. Johnny Herbert in 3rd as you look through 7th through 12th right there. Johnny Herbert is quite the story. His best performer, there's Ukio Katayama taking the Tyrrell off. Katayama was running 13th at the time. That will move Carl Wendlinger up. Johnny Herbert's best in Grand Prix competition in 66 starts. This is his 67th. 4th. He's done it 4 times. So if he can stay on that podium today and perhaps avoid being lapped by his teammate, this will be a great day for Johnny Herbert.
And this will be the first time that the Jordan team have finished in the points this year, so that'll be good for that team. The first time that Peugeot-Jordan relationship has produced anything other than non-finishes. Eddie Irvine did finish at Imola, but for all intents and purposes, when you don't finish in the points, it's a non-finish for these Formula One teams.
And the story coming into the day was Ferrari, represented now only by Gerhard Berger right there. They came into this race in a tie for the Constructors' Championship. The first time they have led it, I believe, since 1990 when Nigel Mansell won for the team in the season opener at Rio. With this finish, Damon Hill in 2nd will break that tie and put Williams back into the lead in the Constructors' Championship over Ferrari and Benetton.
And in fact, 8 different times Ferrari have won that prestigious World Constructors' Championship, and Frank Williams would be quick to tell you that they are more interested in winning that than winning the Drivers' Championship. Mika Häkkinen's reason for retirement was lack of fuel pressure into that Mercedes V10 engine.
I think I need to correct myself. Our crack research department informs me it was 1989 that Nigel won in Rio in the Ferrari. So add another year onto Ferrari's drought.
Eddie Irvine gets to chase the world champion Michael Schumacher again, confirming that Jordan, although it's in the points, is not on the pace. Not on the pace here. 1 lap down.
Schumacher, Hill, Herbert, Berger, Irvine, and Barrichello. Poor Rubens Barrichello has got his 23rd birthday coming up the day after the Grand Prix of Monaco in 2 weeks. Youngest man in Formula One and a Brazilian on a predominantly Irish team, what with Eddie Jordan, the team owner, Eddie Irvine, his teammate, Ian Phillips, their commercial director, Gary Anderson, their technical director. So they decided that they will rename Rubens Barrichello. He is now Rory O'Barrichello.
And of course also backed by the Irish government. Ireland has carried on the car. In fact, the almost comical thing is Ireland is the most prominent sponsor on the neck section of Rubens Barrichello's driving suit. There's another girlfriend of our Spanish director.
I thought that was the new fire suit for the Benetton team. They are a fashion company, you know. One more look into the Benetton garage. I'm not sure exactly what we're looking for, but the Spanish announcers must be waxing eloquent about the Benetton team in some fashion. And well, they might about this man, Michael Schumacher. It's hard to overstate what they have accomplished this weekend, from an undrivable car and a world champion down in the dumps thinking he had no chance in this race. He was out of the top 4 in provisional qualifying. Suddenly on Saturday, he leaps to the front by nearly a second and dominates the Grand Prix from start, we assume, to the finish. We'll stay with it to the checkered flag. Pierluigi Martini, who has spent a lot of time looking in his mirrors today.
Probably fair to say this team likes to win the World Drivers' Championship. They consider that more prestigious than the Constructors' title. They did finish second last year, and of course then went through the engine change process. It has taken them several races to get a true feel for the car, as Katayama could only look on at some sort of a mechanical failure in that Tyrrell Yamaha.
The Benetton sports empire is constantly expanding. You now see their logo on the Grand Prix 500cc World Championship road racing motorcycle of the factory Repsol Honda team. Defending world champ Mick Doohan riding in Benetton colors this year. Look at the speed differential as Schumacher just draws away from the Minardi.
Minardi using that Ford ED version of the engine, as much as 15 kilometers slower per hour down the straight than the front-running cars. Look at the twitch on the Benetton as he goes through this long sweeping third into fourth gear right-hander. This is the slowest corner on the racetrack here. Quickly down to second, and then very quickly up through the gearbox. 45 milliseconds to move one gear to the next, which is still almost twice the speed that Ferrari can move their gears from one gear to the next.
Half the speed, actually.
Half the speed. Did I say that?
No, you said twice. Oh, you're right, actually. It is twice. Twice as slow.
I was close. There's the old Nissan chicane. There was concern when they came here that the end of this straight here did not have enough runoff area. They couldn't modify the runoff area, so Damon Hill requested that more tire barriers be placed against that guardrail in case a car ever did get all the way to the tire barriers. Tires, of course, the great energy absorbers for these racing cars when they get into serious trouble.
I mentioned Grand Prix motorcycles before. They are using a new system to stop wayward bikes and riders with an air-filled cushion along the concrete wall, almost like an airbag in a car. It absorbs the impact of the rider or the bike as it goes off the track, and then reinflates within a few seconds.
So with only one lap to go, we've seen no stop-and-go penalties that we saw at Imola for speeding down the pit lane. And, of course, we saw no penalty at all for Johnny Herbert dragging that pit jack all the way down the pit lane.
Which really amazes me. Given what a lot of people have called the nitpicky nature of the stewardship of Formula One in recent years, the fact that he can drag that potentially lethal device down the pit lane and have it fly off the car when he gets to the end and not receive a penalty for it. Of course, that case is not yet closed, as we've often seen in Formula One as well.
Good look at the top six as the fittest man, still the fittest man in F1, rolls off another one. He's only had 8 pole positions, this being his 8th year this weekend, but he's beginning to pile up the wins.
Final corners for Michael Schumacher, who has absolutely dominated things here this weekend. A track where he has had so many difficulties over the years, he has come back to take victory. An astonishing performance for Michael Schumacher, for Flavio Briatore and the entire Benetton team. Unofficially, Damon Hill will finish second, Johnny Herbert third. A tremendous lift for the Englishman, returning to the team with which he started his Formula One career back in 1989 with a 4th place finish, the first of his 4 in his career at Brazil. A terrific performance for the entire Benetton team, and I expect on the podium there will be an extra measure of joy because the teammates Schumacher and Herbert will be up there with Damon Hill.
And gladly the Jordan twins obviously made it through, and they grabbed 5th and 6th place points. Remember, FOCA travel for the years to come depends on the points that you gather on the previous season. So Eddie Irvine likes to take a wave also to the crowd, hanging on right behind Michael Schumacher.
We'll take a quick timeout and return for podium festivities. More live from the Grand Prix of Spain in Barcelona. Stay with us. Extraordinary happened. There you see the car of Damon Hill. He somehow lost power in the final corners of this race and was passed for second place by Johnny Herbert. In fact, he also lost third place to Gerhard Berger. An astonishing turn of events in the final corners of this race. We did not see it. It did not come up on our timing and scoring. Only when we saw Damon Hill gliding to a stop, pounding on the steering wheel in frustration, did we have any idea that something was terribly wrong with the Williams.
And also something went wrong with Rubens Barrichello, because he did not manage to bring the Jordan across the line into that sixth place. In fact, he finished seventh.
There you see Michael Schumacher. Boy, if we thought there would be joy at a 1-3 finish for Benetton, imagine how they feel as you see Johnny Herbert pulling off his helmet in the foreground. A 1-2 finish for Benetton Renault. An astonishing turnaround.
And a dose of confidence for Johnny Herbert. This may be exactly the tonic he needed to pull his season together. He has an immense amount of talent, still walks with difficulty because of a horrendous Formula 3000 crash several years ago at Brands Hatch. But Johnny Herbert has good reason to smile, and Briatore also.
The cars are in Parc Fermé, where they'll be looked over. The German flag flies high. Michael Schumacher picks up his second Grand Prix victory of 1995. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This ESPN Speed World presentation has been brought to you by Armor All Protectant. When it comes to protection, there are no bargains. Well, an astonishing turn of events at the finish line of the Grand Prix of Spain. See Damon Hill and Rubens Barrichello losing power. So the results are Michael Schumacher, Johnny Herbert, a Benetton 1-2. Gerhard Berger salvages third for Ferrari. Damon Hill finishes fourth, followed by Eddie Irvine and Olivier Panis. The battle rages now once again between Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill in the points championship, and Ferrari squeezes out a 1-point lead in the constructors' title chase over the defending champions from Williams. Quite a day, Derek Daly.
Quite a day, totally dominated by the Benetton team, who have turned things around. They had spent so long chasing the Williams. The Williams boys, in fact, were super confident that this FW17 had the potential to go on and dominate the season. They had a very good test at Imola, despite that crash with Damon Hill. But this is not a sight for Frank Williams to enjoy. He rarely has a smile when he wins. He certainly doesn't have a smile, maybe a scowl, to see that his driver didn't even make the podium.
Hydraulic pressure, which operates the gearbox and many other key parts of the Williams, is blamed for Damon Hill's problems. As the German national anthem plays, Michael Schumacher stands atop the podium once again. And think about this guy, Johnny Herbert, who had so many problems over the years, so many physical difficulties, so many problems that were totally out of his control, including his reputation, were called into question. But today he has come through with a solid second-place finish, and that will lead to a lot of smiles up and down the pit lane. Now the British national anthem, saluting the championship team from Benetton. And the Ferrari resurgence continues with Gerhard Berger in third place. Checkered flag coverage of this race will be coming your way Saturday, June 3rd at 1 a.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Pacific Time on Friday night. And then our next stop will be the Grand Prix of Monaco, Sunday, May 28th, Memorial Day weekend, 9:20 a.m. Eastern Time, live here on ESPN. It's been a most interesting day here in Barcelona, and a result that will surely shake up the standings. It's going to be very interesting as we go to the streets of Monaco, Derek.
And although things were made a little bit easier for Johnny Herbert when David Coulthard exploded a Renault V10. Still, that V10 Renault is the dominant engine, and Gerhard Berger does not look a happy man, although he stands on the rostrum, because he knows, although the Ferrari may begin to feel better, it simply is not fast enough to be competitive in Formula One. And that is not the way to be for the prancing horse.
As we mentioned, a long test is coming up for all of the top teams as they get set for the grandest Grand Prix of all, Monte Carlo, coming your way in 2 weeks' time, live here on ESPN, and we'll hope you join us for that. I'm Bob Varsha for Derek Daly. Thanks for being with us. So long, everyone. See you in Monaco in 2 weeks' time.